Do your feet get cold at night? Not just chilly, I mean that deep, bone-cold feeling where you stack on 2 pairs of socks and still can't get warm. Or maybe this one. You stand up from the couch and the room tilts, just for a second, like the floor shifted underneath you. You grab the wall, wait for it to pass, and then you tell yourself it's nothing. What about the stairs? Do you stop halfway up? Not because you're lazy, not because you're out of shape, but because your chest feels tight and your lungs feel like they forgot how to do their job. And your knees. Do your knees start aching a day or 2 before the rain comes in? Like your body has its own weather forecast that's more reliable than anything on TV. If any of that sounds familiar, I want you to stay with me, because I'm 92 years old and I used to live with every single one of those things. Every single one. And for a long time, I did what most people do. I shrugged and said, well, I'm getting older. That's just how it goes. But it wasn't age. It was my body screaming for help, and I was too busy dismissing it to listen. My name is Maria. I was born in 1932 in a small town where the winters were long and the doctors were far away. You learned to read your own body the same way you learned to read the sky before a storm. You paid attention, you noticed, you figured things out. I want to share with you what I figured out over the course of about 9 decades of living in this body. Not medical advice. I want to be clear about that. Just one old woman's experience and what it taught me about symptoms that most people write off as normal aging. Because here's the thing, a lot of what we accept as normal isn't normal at all. It's a signal, and signals deserve to be understood. Let me start with those cold feet. I had cold feet for years. I'd go to bed at 9 o'clock at night, and by 10, I was wide awake because my feet felt like 2 blocks of ice. My husband used to joke that I was going to freeze him out of the bed. I laughed along with it, but quietly I was bothered. I mentioned it to my doctor once, maybe twice. Both times, he nodded and said something like, circulation slows down as we age. Perfectly normal. And I accepted that for a while. But then I started thinking about it differently. Cold feet aren't just cold. Think about what cold means. It means not enough warmth is reaching there. Warmth comes from blood. Blood comes from the heart and travels through vessels. If the blood isn't arriving, it's not because your body decided to skip your feet. Something along the way is slowed down. There's a backup somewhere, a restriction, a kind of quiet congestion in the vessels, like a highway where the lanes have narrowed down to 1. Doctors often don't talk about this connection openly with older patients. They'll check your heart, run some blood work, and if nothing alarming shows up, they'll send you home and say, circulation slows with age. Which is true, technically, but it leaves out the part where you might actually be able to do something about it. That's the part they don't always mention. I started doing something very simple before bed. A warm compress. Not hot, warm. I would take a towel, run it under warm water, wring it out, and lay it across my feet and ankles for about 15 minutes. While I did that, I would move my ankles in slow circles. First one direction, then the other. Then I'd flex and point my feet, maybe 20 times each. Nothing strenuous. Just gentle movement to remind the vessels they were supposed to be doing a job. The first 3 nights, I didn't notice much. By day 5, I slept through until 2 in the morning without waking up from the cold. By the end of the first week, I was sleeping until 5. That hadn't happened in years. Now, was it a miracle? No. Was it a cure? I'm not calling it that. But something shifted. And once I saw that small shift, I understood something important. My body was still capable of responding. It wasn't broken. It was just being ignored. Let me talk about the dizziness next. That moment when you stand up and the world wobbles. I used to think that was just gravity disagreeing with me. When I was in my 70s, it happened maybe once a week. By my early 80s, it was almost every time I stood up quickly. I started standing up slowly, which helped, but I didn't understand why it was happening. What I eventually came to understand, and again, this was pieced together from my own observation, from conversations, from reading, from paying attention to when it happened and when it didn't, is that when you stand up, your heart has to work quickly to push blood upward to your brain. If your blood pressure is already running a little low, or if your vessels don't adjust as fast as they used to, there's a lag. Your brain gets less blood for a few seconds. That's the wobble. That's the tilt. That's the moment where you reach for the wall. It's not dramatic. It doesn't show up on most tests as a problem. Doctors often don't flag it unless it's extreme. But your body is telling you something. It's saying, the pressure system isn't as responsive as it should be. Maybe you're a little dehydrated. Maybe you've been sitting too long. Maybe the vessels need a little more support. I made 2 changes. First, I started drinking a full glass of water first thing in the morning before I ate anything or moved around much. Just water, room temperature, before anything else. Second, I started doing what I call a sit pause. Before I stand up from anywhere, a chair, the bed, the toilet, I sit on the edge for a count of 10. I let my body know what's coming. I give it time to prepare. The dizziness didn't vanish overnight, but over about 6 weeks, it became rare instead of routine. And here's what struck me. I had lived with that wobble for over a decade, treated it as just part of my life, and a small, deliberate habit reduced it dramatically. I didn't need a prescription for that. I needed to pay attention. Now let me tell you about the stairs. This one matters to me because it was the symptom that scared me most. I was 84 when I first noticed it, not out of breath from exertion, but out of breath from what should have been easy. Half a flight of stairs, 12 steps, and I had to stop. I stood there on the landing, hand on the railing, and I felt my heart beating faster than it should. I thought, this is it. This is the beginning of the end. I genuinely believed that. But I didn't call anyone that day. Instead, I sat down on the top step and I thought about it. What was actually happening? My lungs were working, my heart was beating. I wasn't in pain exactly, just out of capacity. It was like my system had a ceiling that used to be higher. What I didn't realize then, and figured out slowly over time, was that this ceiling had a lot to do with how much I'd stopped moving over the previous 2 years. Not laziness, life. A bad winter, a painful hip, a period of grief after losing a close friend, long stretches of sitting, reading, not moving. My cardiovascular system had quietly adjusted down to meet my new lower demand. It had decided, reasonably, that I only needed to function at this smaller level. The stairs were just exposing that decision. So I made a deal with myself. Every day, I would do the stairs once more than I wanted to. If I wanted to avoid them, I'd do them once. If I'd already done them once, I'd do them twice. Just one more. And before I did them, I would stand at the bottom and take 5 slow, deep breaths. Not a medical intervention, just a signal to my lungs. We're about to work. 3 weeks in, I made it up the stairs without stopping. I stood at the top and cried a little, which embarrassed me, but there it is. Here's what I want to say about that. The body is not a machine that wears out at a fixed schedule. It responds. It adapts. It recalibrates when you give it the right information. Your symptoms are information. They are not a sentence. And the knees. Let me tell you about the knees. By my late 70s, my knees were my weather forecast. Better than the news, better than my phone. 2 days before rain, they would start that deep, dull ache. I told my doctor about it, and he smiled and said, "A lot of people say that." Not dismissive, exactly, but not particularly curious either. It was treated as a quirk, a folk saying brought to life. What I started to think about was why. The popular explanation is changes in barometric pressure. The air pressure drops before a storm, and joints that have any inflammation or fluid buildup feel it. But that explanation had always made me ask, why do some people's knees react and others don't? The answer, as far as I can tell from everything I've read and felt, is that joints that are already carrying some level of chronic inflammation are more sensitive to that pressure change. Healthy joints, properly supported and moving well, don't necessarily react as dramatically. Doctors don't often tell you this. They tell you that knee pain is normal, especially after a certain age. What they don't always say is that the degree of that pain, the sensitivity, the chronic, low-grade inflammation, that's not fixed. It's influenced by how you move, what you eat, and whether the tissue around the joint is being maintained. I made one specific change that helped my knees more than anything else. Every night before bed, I started a 10-minute stretch routine. Nothing complicated. I learned it from a physical therapist I saw once in my late 70s for a different issue, and I just kept doing it. Hamstring stretch, quad stretch, hip flexor stretch, all done lying on my back or sitting on the edge of the bed. Gentle, slow, held for 30 seconds each. Then I would massage both knees with my hands for about 5 minutes. Not deep tissue, just warming the area, moving in slow circles around the kneecap. After 1 week, I slept better. After 3 weeks, the pre-rain ache was duller. After 3 months, it was still there. My knees still knew when the rain was coming, but it was information, not torture. A 4 out of 10 instead of a 7. I also eliminated 2 things from my life around that same time. Once I'd connected the dots on what these symptoms were actually about. The first was long stretches of sitting completely still. I'd been a reader my whole life, and I could sit for 3 and 4 hours with a book without moving. I started setting a small timer. Every 40 minutes, I get up and walk to the kitchen and back, or step outside for a minute. That's it. That's the whole change. But it keeps the blood moving. It keeps the joints from stiffening. It breaks up the stagnation. The second thing I eliminated was a habit I'd had since my 50s of drinking most of my fluids in the evening. Coffee in the morning, then not much during the day, then tea and water in the evening. I didn't realize how chronically mildly dehydrated I was through most of the day. Shifting that, drinking consistently from morning onward, not just in the evening, changed things in ways I didn't expect. The dizziness improved, the cold feet improved, even the fatigue I'd been carrying around shifted. Dehydration is quiet. Doctors often don't flag it unless it's severe, but a body running slightly dry for years does not function the same way as a body that's properly hydrated. The vessels are stiffer, the joints are less cushioned. Everything costs a little more effort. I want to pause here and be honest with you about something. I am not a doctor. I have never claimed to be. What I've described is not a treatment protocol or a medical plan. It's one woman's experience of listening carefully to her own body over a very long life and learning to respond rather than dismiss. But I want to say something about that dismissal because I think it's important. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes with being an older woman describing symptoms to a medical professional and being told it's just age. It happened to me more times than I can count. And I've heard the same thing from friends, neighbors, women I've known for decades. The symptoms get smaller in the telling because we've learned to expect that they'll be minimized. So we minimize them first to protect ourselves from the full experience of not being taken seriously. I think about that sometimes when I talk to younger women in their 50s, their 60s, who are already doing the same thing, already shrinking their experience before they even open their mouth. And I want to say, stop doing that. Your symptoms are telling you something real. Even if no one in a clinical setting is curious about it, you can be curious about it. You can pay attention. You can experiment carefully and observe what changes. Because here is what I know at 92. The body has tremendous intelligence. It knows when something is wrong long before any test will show it. Those cold feet, that wobble when you stand up, that tightness on the stairs, those aching knees, they are not random. They are not simply the price of existing. They are a form of communication. And when you learn to hear them as messages rather than complaints, something changes, not just physically, something in how you relate to yourself. 3 months after I started all of these small changes together, the nightly compress and stretches, the morning water, the sit-pause before standing, the one more flight deal with myself, the movement breaks during reading, I had what I can only describe as a recalibration. I felt more like myself than I had in years. Not younger exactly, that's not the right word. More inhabited, more present in my own body. I still have bad days. At 92, of course I do. But I know the difference now between a bad day and a signal. And when I get a signal, I don't dismiss it. I get curious. That's what 92 years has given me, if nothing else. The absolute certainty that curiosity is more useful than resignation. I've been thinking, as I've been talking to you, about whether any of this sounds familiar. Maybe the cold feet do, but the stairs don't. Maybe it's only the knees. Maybe you recognized something I described in someone you love, a parent, an aunt, a neighbor, who's started holding the wall when she stands up, and you're wondering whether to say something or let it go. I'll tell you what I would want someone to have said to me years earlier than they did. You don't have to just live with it. It's worth asking what it means. It's worth paying attention. If one of these symptoms is something you're carrying around, something you've stopped mentioning because you've been told it's nothing, or because you've started believing it yourself, I'd be glad to hear about it, what it feels like, when it happens, what you've tried. Every body is different, and every story is different. But the signals, it turns out, are often saying something very similar, and none of us should have to decode them alone.